Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Workforce, Labor, Economic Development, Finance Committee here for March 27th. I do see that we have a quorum, members, and I'm looking for a motion from Vice Chair Mecklin to look at the minutes from yesterday, March 26th, for an approval.
Mr. Chair, before we get to me moving the minutes, I do have a minor announcement to make on this date. Back in the 1900s, the fine Chair Baker came into this world. So happy birthday, Mr.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you so much. This is really great. Thank you. You did embarrass me eventually. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you.
And with that, with that, Chair Baker, I move the minutes from March 26th.
Thank you. Members, any comments to those? Otherwise, all those in favor of moving the minutes signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Minutes are carried. Again, welcome. We've got an agenda that is busy today. We're going to do a little bit of a change right away here. We're actually going to hear House File 1965 from Representative Wayne Johnson, if you could move up there quickly, and we're going to move forward. We've got kind of a situation where somebody's got to leave early on that. So we'll hear House File 1965. We'll have the department up next then to give us a brief overview about the department policy for deed. We'll get into some VRS, and then we'll wrap up with our teacher apprentice program with Rep. Mueller. So, good morning, Representative Wayne Johnson. If you could move your bill, and we'll get started.
I'd like to move my bill forward for inclusion.
House File 1965 for later consideration. Go ahead, Wayne, Representative Johnson.
It's a good, thank you, sorry, Chair. It's a good number for a bill. That was the year I was born, so it's one I should remember. So thank you for, Mr. Chair, members, thank you for allowing us to move forward. We have somebody with a family emergency, but they're so dedicated to this bill, they wanted to still be here. So we thank you for doing that. So House File 1965 is a great bill that has to do with helping businesses and people who want to be successful business people. I thank you to members who have signed on to the bill. It's a very good one. One of the keys of successful business is the access to capital, but also access to the people who know how to help you with that capital. And it can make the difference between a successful business and one that does not succeed. Small business play a crucial role in all our districts, and small business owners employ nearly half the workforce in Minnesota, creating jobs, expanding the tax base, and contributing to the vitality of our communities. But starting and maintaining a business presents a lot of challenges to entrepreneurs, especially if they don't have traditional access to business resources or the necessary startup capital. Business owners that work with an advisor or officer from a nonprofit economic development organization or a community development financial institution are more likely to not only avoid costly mistakes, but actually set up a path to a successful business for years to come. The Small Business Assistance Partnership Program has been helping small businesses in Minnesota succeed for 14 years. House File 1965 will maintain the funding level invested in this program during the 2023 legislative session. This proven program is a cornerstone of DEED's small business programs, and through a competitive process, nonprofit economic development organizations contract with DEED to offer free small business technical assistance to entrepreneurs and small business owners across Minnesota. I've seen firsthand how this program helps small businesses in my own district, working in partnership with the Washington County CDA. MCCD uses this program to help small business owners like Mary, who will be here testifying, who is a constituent of mine, and you'll hear from in a little bit. As noted on the handout, the statistics show a great return on investment for the state. In 2023 alone, the program helped create or preserve over 20,000 jobs and leveraged $158 million in public and private financing. Because of the competitive application process, this program ensures that the dollars are being spent evenly between Greater Minnesota and the metro area, and that nonprofits receiving awards must report data to Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, so we can track the impact these dollars have in communities. Funds are reimbursed after metrics in the contracts are met on a quarterly basis, helping to avoid fraud. Today I have testifiers. Michelle, is she on Zoom?
She's online, yep.
So I have two testifiers here today, and they're both on Zoom. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Representative Johnson. We will go to our testifiers. Ms. Moratsky is online. If you can hear us all right, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, please, for the committee and proceed. And also, I'll tell everybody today, if I could, we're trying to keep everybody to about a 2.5 minute limit. So again, we'll have the card system going again, just because we have a lot of testifiers in other bills as well. So we'll just try to be consistent today, everybody. So Ms. Moratsky, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Super. Chair Baker, Chair Pinto, members of the committee, my name is Michelle Moratsky, and I serve as the Interim Executive Director and Business Development Manager for Candy-Ojai County Economic Development. I urge you to support House File 1965 and the Small Business Assistance Partnerships Program. This critical funding from the Department of Employment and Economic Development supports the Elevate Community Business Academy and Business Assistance Program, a partnership with Southwest Initiative Foundation, Candy-Ojai County Economic Development, and Rising Tide Capital. Since 2021, Elevate CBA has helped over 100 Candy-Ojai County entrepreneurs graduate from a 12-week business development course, leading to more than 35 new small businesses in Candy-Ojai County. These businesses include grocery stores, construction companies, a 500-head goat farm, and therapy businesses. These businesses strengthen our communities and our economy. Without this funding, we must find new funding sources to maintain the program's success. The Small Business Assistance Partnerships Program is a proven tool that ensures small businesses receive the support, including local technical assistance that they need to be successful as Minnesota business owners. I urge you to maintain 2023 funding levels with a $7.4 million investment in one-time funding. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moratsky, and for your testimony this morning.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Co-Chair Pinner.
Thank you. I need to run to present another bill, but I actually was going to make a brief comment, a supportive comment about the bill, and I wonder if I could just do that now.
Go ahead.
Simply.
That's
Thank
fine.
you so much. And what I was going to say, and thank you, Representative Johnson, and to the testifier, both the one who just spoke and others. And I just wanted to, we've had discussions about kind of how to shape grants in our committee, and I just want to point this program as being a great example of one where we established it to have grants to community organizations to provide small business development and technical assistance services. And then it is this kind of competitive grant. We gave the money to DEED. We said, hey, you get that money out to different organizations around the state. And I think that there's a real advantage to the setting up of that. And so just kind of want to highlight that for the members of the committee as we're putting our budget together. We've obviously got challenges in exact amounts of money we can put in, but shaping it this way, Representative Johnson, I appreciate doing. I think this is a good model to be using. And so I appreciate you highlighting this, Mr. Chair. And I think this is, we can think about this and other similar programs indeed as being places to kind of ways to track money. So I appreciate the time to say this, Mr. Chair, and I'll pop out and come back. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Next up would be Mary Sagrinia. No, I didn't get that right, and I apologize, but if you could please unmute yourself and please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, Chair Baker, Chair Pinto, and members of the community. My name is Mary Sagrinia. I am the founder and owner of Patience and Bubbles Childcare in Mankato, Minnesota. Patience and Bubbles Childcare is opening very soon. We're here to care for infants, toddlers, and preschool-age children, including those with developmental disabilities like autism and others. We'll focus on providing a nurturing and inclusive environment, and we're committed to supporting the growth and development in every child within our care. I was having a hard time finding childcare for myself with my kids, including specialized childcare for kids with autism. I have a child with autism as well. There was a great need in the community, and it was extremely hard for me to find adequate care. I decided to solve my own problem and open up a childcare center that could help serve my kids and other kids within the community. I'm also in school for social work, my master's in social work and then I hope in the future to be able to combine childcare and mental health services to better help kids identify the early signs of developmental disabilities and set kids up on the best path early. Working with Tyler at MCCB has been a great experience. Tyler was a partner and incredibly helpful in making my business become a reality. I'm also working with MCCB to secure funding. The resources from the Small Business Assistance Partnership Program helped me grow my business, to build wealth for me and my family, and I want that for other entrepreneurs and many other small business owners too. Thank you all for the opportunity to testify today, and thank you to the Representative Johnson for carrying this bill. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Mary, and I appreciate your stepping up and really helping solve some of the problems by opening up your own daycare center. So congratulations and thank you for that. Next up would be Mr. Lee Hall. He's at the table here, so welcome to the committee. Introduce yourself and proceed.
Chairman Baker, members of the committee, thank you for having me here this morning. My name is Lee Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of Next Stage. We are a nonprofit economic development program operating primarily here in the metro area. I'm also here to speak on behalf of the Economic Development Association of Minnesota's Government Relations Committee in support of this bill. I think the speakers that have gone before have really addressed why this is important for the entrepreneurs. I just want to talk about why maintaining consistent level of funding of this program is important for its ongoing success. I have been working in community economic development, working with entrepreneurs and small businesses for nearly 30 years now through every imaginable type of economic environment, from the dot-com environment to the great financial crisis to the COVID emergency. And I can tell you that the need and demand and the the energy and the desire of entrepreneurs to pursue their dreams doesn't abate when the economy slows or we get into rocky waters. And in fact, what we see is consistently more entrepreneurs coming into entrepreneurship as maybe they're looking at job loss. And I just want to say that this is an incredibly challenging job. I've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and small business owners over the years. I am constantly learning as I go. There is a steep learning curve to this business, and this industry, this field, has added a number of wonderful providers across the state in the last 5 years. A significant drop in the funding for this program will mean losing a number of those quality providers who really are just coming into their own. I think that's particularly significant given the number of providers we've added with from diverse communities and generally underserved communities. And so I just urge this committee to, again, support this bill, maintain the funding so we can maintain the workforce and continue to develop that talent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Is there anybody else from the public that would wish to testify for or against the bill? Seeing none, member questions? Seeing none? Thank you very much. Representative Wayne Johnson, would you please give us a final comment? This bill will be laid over.
Chair Baker, and thank you, members. One of the toughest things for somebody who starts a business is going from the field into the office. And having access to people who have done that and know the steps and the missteps that you make the huge difference. I've seen so many people that have said, I can do this, and then they get into the office away from being out there doing the work, and it's an eye-opening experience. And the more businesses we can help create and succeed and not fail is the better Minnesota for us all. So thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Representative Johnson. Again, the chair will renew that we are holding House File 1965 for further consideration in a future bill. Thank you very much. With that, members, we'll go to the top of the agenda again with my bill, House File 2251. Again, like yesterday, Chair Pinto will stay here. I'll stay here and let the department kind of present the policy bill. And I want to welcome Mr. Bowdry to the testifying table. And you are free to go whenever you want to. So the chair again will say that House File 2251 is in front of the committee and will be laid over for further consideration. Welcome, Mr. Boudry, and proceed.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Devin Bowdry, Government Relations Director. And real quick, maybe at some risk of losing my job, I regret that on this bill I don't have the double Johnson, but I do appreciate I have the double Dave here. It's very important to me.
Big deal. Yep.
Okay, serious business. I'm just going to walk through section by section. It's a pretty straightforward bill, making 4 changes here. So section 1 relates to the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership Board. On this section, we are just proposing that the commissioner be allowed to have a designee sit on this board. You can see in the statute, others are allowed to have a designee. I've seen this language in other boards and advisory councils, like the Energy Transition Advisory Council being an example. So this would just allow someone else to take his place if there are logistical challenges to the commissioner being available. Sections 2 and 3 both relate to sunsetting a couple of reports. The first report being the Inventory of Economic Development Programs. This is kind of an enterprise-wide report of reports. We think with this report that we have other metrics that we collect that are more useful and less duplicative. That's the key thing with both of these reports, really, is that we see that they're duplicative, they're costly to produce, and we'd like to build on the programs and the performance metrics that we already have. So Section 2 would sunset the inventory report, and Section 3 would sunset the net impact report. And lastly is Section 4 and 5. These relate to the same program, State Services for the Blind. This just updates state statute to remove or replace any instance of stands or machines and update that to facility, which is what the federal statute says. So just conforming there. And that is really all the policy bill is. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boudry, for that. Any other folks in the audience want to testify for or against the policy bill? Seeing none, we'll move it to the member questions. Any members have any questions for the department? Again, a very technical bill. Again, there's really nothing in it that we can see. I maybe have a few questions offline, but very minor, and I think this is fine the way it is. And again, like we said, we will be laying this over. So seeing no member questions, thank you very much for bringing it forward. And House File 2251 will be laid over for further consideration. So thank you. All right, members, we're going to take a chance to get an overview of the VRS services, which are vocational rehab services. Today we have Assistant Commissioner Evan Rowe that'll be presenting with us today. And he's got a slide presentation, I believe, and that was also in your packets. And again, this has been something that has come up recently. I wanted to make it part of our conversation this year, specifically now after the recent budget announcements from the governor, some of the cutbacks and some of the changes in our budget. I think it's a good place for us to understand VRS services better. And I've learned a lot about this in the last few weeks. So with that, members, appreciate you being here. Mr. Rowe, please, again, introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy birthday. My name's Evan Rowe, Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And the bulk of my presentation is going to be on VRS today. There is sort of a related federal issue that I thought I would just kind of start with briefly, since I've gotten some other member questions. Figure, given the valuable nature of this committee's time, try to kill two birds with one stone. So just for overall context, DEED has many programs that are federally funded and are therefore, I seem to have triggered some sort of auto captioning on here. There we go. Technical errors. DEED has many programs that are federally funded and are, therefore impacted by changes in federal policy and context. A couple that I think have come up in public discussion lately have been Disability Determination Services, which is a completely federally funded program and is subject to Social Security Administration oversight, and Voc Rehab, which receives funding through the United States Department of Education and is facing budget challenges to what I would describe as a confluence of factors, and we'll get into all of that in a bit. Just regarding DDS, this is a program that serves Minnesota residents who file applications for disability benefits and Minnesotans who are reviewed for continuing eligibility for SSI and SSDI claims. They receive cases from SSA field offices, and it's, again, 100% funded by federal dollars. just for member awareness, as part of the whole March federal budget continuing resolution process, some of you might have heard that we'd had to issue layoff notices to staff ahead of the potential government shutdown, which were immediately rescinded upon passage of that CR. So SSA, administrative funding overall is being reduced. We haven't received information of cuts to DDS units at this time, but it's an evolving situation. You might have also heard that there have been some previously announced Social Security field office closures and reductions in field support. Again, those have an upstream but not necessarily a direct impact on DDS units. So we're continuing to monitor this, and we'll update stakeholders as we learn more. Just wanted, since many of you may be hearing from folks around Social Security benefits, we do have a part of that at our agency. So back to vocational rehab services. So this is a program that assists Minnesotans with disabilities to prepare for, find, and keep a job. And really, its purpose is to help support independent living. Disability runs an entire spectrum of people and conditions and natures. And what our team does, both through our own staff and through a variety of contracted case providers, is to provide employment-related services to thousands of Minnesotans with disabilities each year who seek competitive, integrated employment. Who are the customers of Voc Rehab? These are folks whose disabilities cause serious functional limitations in their lives, specifically in achieving an employment goal. So VR staff work within the Career Force Network and across the state to deliver services that include, assessment, vocational evaluation of what folks are well suited to, training to help folks achieve career outcomes, rehabilitation counseling, assistive technology. That's actually a really interesting and expanding field enabled by a lot of new technology, and of course job placement. Some customers might also receive post-employment services. They might need some support to maintain employment as they are in the workforce, as they continue to stay in the workforce. And again, many of these services are delivered through collaborative partnerships between public and private providers. Again, we have a very talented state staff, a few of whom I believe are in the room today, as well as a network of community partners who are that we contract with when the services, where it makes sense for those services to be delivered by third parties. So, in terms of funding, VRS is a federal-state partnership with most of the funding coming through a federal grant. That federal grant requires a state match. Funding is about 80% federal through the U.S. Department of Education, as I previously mentioned, and that other 20% is provided as state match funding. So just in terms of the changing context, and I think Chair Baker had asked kind of some questions just about some changes in context and changes that the program is having to make to ensure financial stability. I think when we were looking over the last couple of years, maybe 2022 to late 2024, you saw there had been a pretty significant backlog for case services and a really strong pent-up demand for folks with disabilities who wanted to get into the workforce, but the program had not been able to provide those services. At that time, there had been some pretty strong additional federal funding capacity, and the program had had some substantial unspent carry-forward funds that they were able to employ to accelerate program service delivery. We'd made some significant efforts to increase hiring and retention in our staff, and there was also a need to expand pre-ETS, so pre-employment training services, I guess, which is a component that's required under the Department of Education grant that we spend at least 15% of our VR funding in delivering those services. Those are to people who are under the age of 18 and generally still in school. What we've seen, though, over since really late 2024 to now is there's been financial stress, not just in our program, but in other state VR programs. We have a negative outlook in federal funding. State budget outlook has been flat, and there's been a continued growth in costs. And that sort of necessitated some work to ensure that the program is able to operate on a sustainable financial trajectory. I'll kind of walk us through some contributing factors here. Here, what we have is a summary of the federal funding that's been available and the state match and kind of the total state and federal funding. And you've seen, federal funding was modestly increasing in federal fiscal years 20 and 21, and then 22. You see the base grant from 22 to 24 and projected for 25 and 26 was 47.4, so that remained flat. The program was able to get some reallotment funding. Reallotment funding is when funding is available from other states that don't spend their entire grant. We were able to get some of that in 22 and 24, but the outlook for that is negative for 25 and 26. Other VR programs are reporting similar kind of financial pressures from what we have heard, and it is less likely that and the department expects that it is unlikely that we will be able to get that. So that's about a $5.4 million hit in terms of what the program, in terms of the resources that the program expects to be able to count on going forward. Another contributing factor has been increased service delivery expenditures. This chart on the right kind of gives a brief overview of just the cost increases for contracted case services. And what's the reason for this? So once a participant is enrolled in Voc Rehab, there is a federal requirement that we provide ongoing services for the individual until they exit the program, whether hopefully successfully in employment or whether they exit because they leave the program. And I think there are some similarities to some of the challenges that we are seeing kind of across waiver services and some of the other disability programs. We've seen greater complexity of client needs. And that also kind of leads to increased costs in terms of the types of support that we have had to provide. So I think what we see here is that sort of the growth in these case services expenditures has been on an unsustainable trajectory. Additionally, I would note that we have seen in what is a very good thing in many ways, reduced staff attrition rates. That's good in terms of service delivery, but it has added to budgetary pressures. And I would say that there have been increased staff unit costs overall, just as kind of unit costs have grown for case services as well. Other kind of contributing factors here, there's more applications and more intake. Applications are up about 50% annually since 2020. Again, that is a good thing. We want people to apply, but it does put pressure on the program. Additionally, I mentioned the pre-employment training services for students have seen significant increases in demand. As far as, we provided this just for a little bit of kind of context around, the breakout of the clients that we serve. The way that the Rehabilitation Services Administration of the Department of Education, has states break out Voc Rehab clients is kind of by priorities of service. First priority are the folks who have the greatest needs. Second, have the second greatest needs, so on and so forth. By far, we're serving folks who are in that top priority category right now. And we did think it might just be helpful to see the average cost of goods and services per participant for the previous federal fiscal year, just to demonstrate that there are, significant expenditures that tie in to serving these clients. So, I think hopefully the data that we showed kind of demonstrates that there's some very significant cost pressures on the program and that there's a need to bring expenditures back in check to meet what we expect to be the resources available for the coming years. I would say that what the department and the program has worked to do to date, they've put in place a hiring freeze and offered some early retirement and other voluntary staffing incentives to help bring staff costs to a more manageable place. We've increased controls over our external spend and using staff to provide direct services as feasible, and working to decrease internal operations costs. So those are all kinds of pieces that the program has been undertaking to work to the new sort of federal and state budget context. So in terms of next steps, as you saw yesterday, the governor's revised budget includes about $5 million in additional state match to help support program operations. Given that the state match has not increased in close to a decade and we have a negative federal outlook, the governor proposed that in his revised budget to help ensure that these vital services remain available to as many Minnesotans as possible. It's good for the workforce, it's good for employers. And I think our efforts at the agency are really on continuing to monitor and manage expenditures and continuing to work with our stakeholders to ensure service access. We work with the State Rehabilitation Council, community rehab partners, and a variety of other entities to try to make sure that we are running the program in a way that best serves the needs of Minnesotans with disabilities. And that's going to be the continued focus of the program. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to have a comment to this presentation or any thoughts to this? We don't have anybody signed up, and I don't think we have anybody, but we'll close that to member questions. So again, I think I have one opening question, and then I'll see if others have any questions as well. Thank you for the presentation. As the chair, again, I wasn't fully aware of sort of the urgency of this when we got rolling here early in 2025. But the conversations that I've been having in my, certainly my district, as an employer, I've used these services. We love working with, whether it's students or adults in this area. It is life-changing for them. And this also sort of ties together with the IPS discussions we were having yesterday and the decision that the governor made about really cutting major portion out of IPS because it kind of runs alongside of VRS. And I just, my concern is, and my question is, when, going into this fall, a lot of students were involved in the VRS program, and they were kind of gearing up for another, robust year. And again, even just a few months ago, I think you were still hiring people last spring and summer and offering hiring bonuses to get people to work in this program. And then almost overnight, it just ended. Not ended, but it was drastically changed, where the student programs basically ended. Again, you mentioned today we're doing some early retirements. We've canceled a lot of the contracts with people that were also helping with this VRS services. But there's something more here. It wasn't a drastic change in funding. You can't budget the allotment monies that were out there that you were getting some bumps from in your earlier presentation, in your earlier slide here. Something is missing in this piece, Deputy Commissioner, and I want to better understand what that is and what was missing here. Was it an oversight internally? Was there somebody who didn't report the numbers? Because I don't remember this coming out, and because it was such a drastic change in the direction of a program that was really being used well, something else happened. What am I missing?
Well, thank you,
Mr. Rowe.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a few things. And again, I would point, aside from the things that I kind of mentioned in terms of the overall cost pressures and kind of increases in utilization, the program had previously had some pretty substantial carry forward that they were able to take advantage of because of underspend in previous years. That began to reduce over time. The other thing I would say is, the federal context does matter in the sense that, going into the fall, there were probably indications that that there might be better, that might be a stronger federal funding picture as we've gone through the year and have seen some of the changes at the Department of Education, and as we've seen other kinds of guidance that we're getting from our colleagues in the federal administration. That gives us less confidence that we would be able to access things like reallotment that the department had previously been able to rely upon in much more detail. In terms of the timing, I would also just say, the program is on a federal fiscal year, and some of the kind of reports that we rely upon to I guess, kind of unpack budgetary situations, kind of were updated in the late fall, and I think that kind of explains some of the timing challenges. It's a complex program with a lot of, with a number of different clients and stakeholders. And so I think some of the budget projections that we got were sort of late breaking in the fall, which just, once we knew that we had to kind of take significant, we had to take action to ensure financial stability for the program.
Again, there's a lot of folks that want to just point to the federal side of things in your anticipation. Your numbers now show a very consistent federal funding coming along. I don't know that I really buy into the answer that you just gave because I don't see it on the numbers that you did present earlier with a major still portion of this federal funding coming along. And again, as I also looked at some other information here in the past, in 2017, there was roughly 17,000 people that you were helping in this program. In 2023, there was 14,000 people. Still a lot of people. There's pressure to do this, but the numbers have been sort of declining, and maybe that's because we have more people that have got off the program, which is a good thing. But the expenses were going up, as you shown earlier, but the people that we were helping was declining over the last 5-6 years. So again, I don't understand why the applications are backwards to what the funding was doing. And so this is where we need to kind of dive into this better to understand the reality of this program, which is important, and how so many students quickly just ended the program. This is a major issue. So I'm going to hold off for now. Any other member questions at this point? I think we had a few other, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for the presentation. You know, I was listening to the questions that were being asked about maybe something's missing, and I do think there's something missing. Certainty, that's what's missing. We can't continue to put our hand in the sand and pretend like nothing is happening at the federal level that isn't impacting us at the state level. I mean, I'm looking at this document. It says 80% federal funding through the U.S. Department of Education. That Department of Education is trying to be eradicated right now. That is what's missing, certainty. We are very uncertain about what's happening right now, and it's having a huge impact on many states, but particularly our state that we are responsible for here. And we have to consider those impacts and determine what we're going to do to move forward to protect our state and to protect those workers and the folks that we're serving that are being impacted by this. So with that said, with the uncertainty of what's happening at the federal level, with the knowing that the Department of Education may be going away soon and things are being moved around there, how has that had an impact on how you're determining things in your department?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rep. Frazier, I think it's something that we're trying to monitor very closely as we work with our federal partners. The day that they announced, I think it was the 50% staff reduction at the Department of Education, it was a bit of a scramble on our end trying to see which of our program contacts were still there, trying to understand, what other knock-on effects there might be. To date, we have been able to access our grants, and we've not had impacts to that. But I think, we're still trying to monitor and trying to be careful, to your point, because I would say many agencies across the state are seeing a lack of certainty. I think just yesterday I heard about the Department of Health losing access to something like $120 million in grant funding pretty much overnight. We very much hope that is not going to happen in this case. I think there has been bipartisan support for voc rehab, but we are in a time of uncertainty and we need to adjust. And we are, some of these efforts we are making is to try to preserve, the greatest resiliency that we can for the program overall.
Representative Frazier, I just want to point out one thing, though. These changes were made far before we even knew the outcome of the election, of the federal election. So I know certainty is a big thing for a lot of people to know what is happening, but these decisions were being made far before we even knew who was going to be the next federal leader. So my point is, we can't use that excuse in this because those decisions have been made prior to that. And again, this was a big program that is making major switch. I just want to make sure the timing is right on this. So we don't want to just say you're making major budget changes because of the uncertainty of not knowing. This is far before that was known. Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I can appreciate just being considerate of timelines, but right now in front of us, we know there's some uncertainty that's happening right now. Deputy Commissioner just stated an example, I think is a perfect example of what's happening in our health department here because of what's going down at the federal level. And what I will say, and I'll end with this comment, is that when the red lights are flashing, And we're seeing examples of what the impacts will be, like what's happening with our Department of Health and the impacts on the federal level. We have to pay attention to those red lights, and we have to plan accordingly.
Representative, Commissioner Rowe? Was that a question?
I don't think I wouldn't add anything to that.
Okay. Representative Mueller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Rowe, for your information. I would just like to, again, say, as I've said many times, when we talk about downsizing or even dismantling the DOE, the funding isn't going away. We've already found out that funding is going through other streams. And Commissioner Rowe just said right now, none of his grants have been denied. None of his grants have not come through. He just said that. And so we're not talking about a lack of funding simply because we had a change at the federal level. When we look at his own slides, it shows that the bump that they had in 22 and 24 was because of reallotment, which is when other states don't use their funding. And then just at the very end, you said we have to be careful because of negative federal outcome that we have to, we lost on that. You did not lose on it. If you look on your slide, it actually maintains very consistent in the mid to upper 40 million, and you are getting all of that money. You can't count on states not using their money and then getting it back. You can't count on that. The funding has maintained. And so when the red lights are flashing, the red lights have been flashing long before, but it has nothing to do with the federal government. It has much more to do with what's happening right here in Minnesota at how we're doing and how we're looking at and working and administering this VRS. So something I think that should be very clear, especially if we look at the timeline. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Rowe, if you could be specific with this question. When was the agency aware of the budget shortfall in the VRS, or Vocational Rehabilitation Services Division? Like what date?
Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Representative Bakeberg, I would say that we saw some initial signs in the summer of 24, and that's when we began. And I guess what I would say is we did take, then that was, I guess what I would say there is they were initial signs for an issue that would maybe not have the same kind of urgency of the issue that I'd say, found kind of later in the fall, based on kind of the initial financial projections that we'd had at that point. In the summer, in the summer we implemented a hiring freeze, we implemented some kind of some incremental controls on expenditures. Towards the end of kind of making an intervention that was tied, I would say that all of our interventions are tied to trying to ensure that clients have access, that we preserve access for all of the VRS clients that we possibly can. So I would say we took some initial steps in the summer and fall of 24, and then as we got updated financial projections through the fall, then it became clear that the financial position, had deteriorated and that we needed to take further action.
Representative Bakeberg.
When was the election, Mr. Rowe?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Representative Bakeberg, I believe it was in November. I can't remember the date.
Representative Bakeberg.
So is November after the summer and fall?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, to my recollection it is.
Okay.
Representative Bakeberg.
So going back, you said the summer of 24, you had some initial indications, but nothing urgent in the summer of 24. And then you went into the fall. When is it true that DEED hired over 100 administrative staff for the VRS program in September of 24?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Representative Bakeberg, I do not believe that is true.
Representative Bakeberg.
Okay, because I'm being told that there was some additional hiring happening. And I think it's pretty disingenuous to try to blame things on federal impacts when you yourself said that in the summer of 24, you knew this was happening. And then in your own testimony that you just gave, you said that the state match had not increased for decades.
Mr. Rowe. Sorry, Mr. Rowe.
I guess, is there a question I could answer there, Representative?
Representative Baker?
How would you respond to that?
Representative, I'm sorry, Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I guess I could offer a couple thoughts. I said the state match had not increased in almost a decade. I didn't say decades, just to clarify that point. I think the other thing I would say is the summer, so having initial signs of budgetary challenges in the summer is one thing, and then I would say that we saw a significantly deteriorated financial position based on these factors that we were discussing later in the fall. So I guess what I would say is, as we get more data, we are able to understand the nature of the situation better. So I don't think it's inconsistent with what we've been discussing, and I would say that the continued, that uncertainty does have an impact.
Rep. Bakeberg?
Yeah, just to close out, Mr. Chair, I think the timeline is very clear that there's a lack of ownership. You knew it was happening. You knew the budget projections, and what it feels like to me and many of my constituents is that we're trying to deflect and not owning the lack of attention to detail. And that's the responsibility of the agency. So I'll end with that.
Thank you very much. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner Rowe. I think as we're talking about both of these programs, both the disability determination and the VRS, we're talking about programs that are almost 80-20 federal to state, and with disability determination, 100% federally funded. So I think it's sitting here listening to the conversation about how, we don't know what's going to happen at the federal. All we can control is at the state. In these cases, we don't. We all agree we can't control what happens at the federal level, but we are subject to it, and our communities are subject to it, and we have to create a biennial budget that has to account for it. And when we lose 80%, if we're going to lose it or not, or 20%, or resources, we have to figure it out. It'll affect our people. But this who knows what tomorrow will bring budgeting that we keep hearing is not going to serve our people well. And we can say that in the legislature. The agencies can't. The agencies are the ones who actually employ folks and have to plan for not just the next 6 months, but the next 4 years, and don't want to start people on programs that then there's uncertainty about whether they will continue. My question, I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about disability determination, because that is 100% federally funded. And in a lot of places, what we're hearing from folks is about the length of time it's taking, again, to get their benefits, the process, right? And what we know is when you cut employees who do benefits determination, when you cut people who provide that service, you are making it harder for Minnesotans, in this case, to get the benefits they are entitled to. My mom was on SSI, and it took her a long time to get her benefits. And that was obviously a long, long time ago. I was a kid. But I actually am learning. I didn't realize that Dee did that work, and Dee did that work for the Social Security Administration. We're hearing about cuts to Social Security Administration staff and closures. And I'm wondering if you have, if you could sort of tell us, because I think we are going to have to think about what the state can do to make sure that Minnesotans who are disabled or who need a disability determination can get access to that. So how will SSI, our ability to help those folks, be impacted by the uncertainty at the federal level? Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Representative Greenman, I think it's a complex and evolving topic. So as I think I mentioned briefly in my remarks, DEED's role kind of comes towards the end of the SSI SSDI determination process. An individual will go to a field office, get a medical evaluation, generally speaking, and then that information will be forwarded to the department where we do the disability determinations, right? Essentially take in the medical data and learn how and evaluate what disability grade somebody is entitled to. So upstream impacts that that I think are being reported around field offices, some of those telephone items, things like that, will ultimately have an impact on the volume of cases that we get, as well as the kind of timeliness from beginning to end, because somebody who's seeking SSI or SSDI is thinking about this probably from the time they go to that first doctor's appointment. I would also say right now there is a hiring freeze at the federal level for DDSs, and we actually we are not allowed to backfill staff that have attrited in that program. So it is a challenge.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And and Deputy Commissioner Rowe, and I think we need to be thinking about what Minnesota can do. Because again, we don't control what happens at the federal level, but we certainly are subject to it. So I'm wondering, I have two questions related to this, and I'll just give you them both because they're probably related. The first question is, given the hiring freezes, and if we see more, what can Minnesota do, and if you know how much it'll cost, to ensure that we're getting people through that determination. The second question is related, which is what we're also hearing, and we now know, and there's been court decisions about it, is that DOJ is going through the Social Security database and actually has access to tons of private information of Minnesotans. And so I'm wondering if there is anything that we can do to protect the privacy that people expect, that federal law requires, of Minnesotans who are giving information because they're looking for disability determination, what we can do to protect their data, their privacy from what courts have said is likely unauthorized and data without protections. What can Minnesota do?
To both of those questions, Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. Probably worth a much longer conversation. One kind of unique thing about DDS staff and their work is they essentially, they are state employees, but they are working within federal systems and federal federal structures. So they follow work procedures that are defined by by the SSA. They have SSA.gov email accounts. And they work on systems that are provided by the Social Security Administration. So the work is in many ways kind of very constrained by federal policy and rules there. With that, with that said, I think it's an important question that you ask, and I think what's kind of the chat, maybe the nature of the issue here is sort of the change in that federal-state relationship and how that will continue to evolve. I don't have the answer. I don't know if anybody does right now.
Can I just?
Quick follow-up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would just say, and I think from this conversation and this conversation we've been having in lots of committees, is the something missing is the federal chaos, the federal changing of direction from the last, frankly, couple of decades. And so I think when we're putting together a budget, when we are thinking about these programs, we actually need to think about what Minnesota can do to protect and serve people. We obviously can't fill the hole. We can't fill the 80% hole, but we do need to start and continue having that conversation because that's our job here in the legislature. Thank you.
To Representative Greenman, again, you mentioned the word chaos. The chaos started in the department back in September, October. I just want to be clear about that. Timeline is important. Did you see that there was chaos at that time too? Representative Greenman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I see is a program that's funded 80-20 that said that they'd been using allotted funds from other states to increase program for folks, and that looking at the uncertainty coming in the future, and now looking at the thing that they can't even get field offices to call them back, that's actually what the department is thinking about. I know, I would assume that you guys don't plan on 6-month increments or year increments. You're probably thinking a few years out. So that's the chaos I think we're all trying to deal with here in Minnesota and frankly states around the country.
Again, to that question, I think, again, they should be looking at 6 months, 2 years out for planning purposes. Just a few months ago, this isn't like a big gotcha. This is not what we're trying to do here today. I'm trying to understand what happened to a program that's been stood up, promoted, hiring bonuses. We are throwing money at a program because there was a good need for both students and adults. The ISP, the IPS program, which is the best program out there for mentally illness folks wanting to get to work. I have talked to a number of providers that said this program with our, again, if you've got a mental illness provider back home, they're using this and then they pass it on to a provider that helps get people to work. They might have a lot of anxiety of being in the public. They might have depression. They might have a lot of historical abuse. Whatever that might be, these kinds of programs are really critical. And to have a plan of a slow down, ramp down, what's happening here is a lot of chaos because all of a sudden it came out of nowhere. And again, I look at the department here and on December 1st, DEED published the IPS report. Again, that's the individual placement support for folks with mental illness that want to get to work. There was no alert in that for a budget deficit. In December of this last year, 2024, there's no alert of a budget deficit for this program. Now, we just heard yesterday the governor takes $1 million out of that program, which is 60%, members. 60%. The governor wants to reduce that program by 60%. Just think about that. Again, I'm not putting numbers out there because I want to alarm anybody, but that's a big deal. We heard 2 testifiers yesterday saying that's massive. This is affecting a lot of people. Even though the budget's only $2.55 million really for the IPS program, $1 million is a big hit to that. Now, this committee is going to be facing some really hard financial challenges this year. That's what we are paid to do. We're going to have to make those hard decisions. I hope that we can somehow find the dollars to help the governor not do those cuts. I think that that's a program that I want to certainly try to work hard to do. What I'm trying to get to, though, is the report that came out showed no significant issues with budgets. If you want to look at it, it's there, but there's 2 different reports because one has different information than the other one. This report was required by statute, so that's up there. So we were provided a report also dated December 1st, which contained a warning of individual placement services which are inside the VRS program, again, vocational rehab services, and they were facing a deficit. So my question might be, Mr. Rowe, this was not part of the published report with the ISPs. Why was that not alerted to us at that time?
Mr. Chair, so I guess maybe just one clarifying point I would just note is that IPS is a separate program from VRS, and my understanding is that federal VR funds actually can't be used for IPS programs. So it is a separate appropriation, just as one point of clarification. As far as the report, I guess I'd need to see the report just to see what the language was in there. But my sense is it's an appropriate. I mean, the IPS program is an appropriation, and so I think the nature of the budget items there are somewhat different.
Again, there's a lot of confusion about the way that it was reacted to so quickly, so abruptly. 80 people, I think you shared with me, about 80 people in the state will either have to have early retirements or be given termination letters probably soon. And that's a big deal. Again, I know we're under some fiscal constraints here. This is not about me trying to not talk about reasonable changes to our budget structure. But the way this was brought to us in a last minute sort of uh-oh, we're in trouble, I think there needs to be some understanding about how did we get to this quick show of, uh-oh, we're in trouble from the reports that were due in December that we were not able to kind of plan for this. But all of a sudden, things in the last really 30 days, 60 days have really changed the dynamics here. So I want to protect these programs as best we can with limited dollars. I understand we don't know everything about the federal budget. We never have known everything about the federal budget. But what we will do is try to do the best we can with what we have. I just need to make sure that the information we're getting from the department is accurate, timely, and real. And I'm not getting that same story when I go home or I talk to other folks about these issues that are really affecting some of our best workforce placement programs with people with mental illness, with people with disabilities, and those are the people we should be working towards the most. So again, I just want to bring that up. I have two final member questions, and then I'm going to go to Wayne Johnson. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Thank you. What is the deficit? What is the deficit amount that you're forecasting?
So,
Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Representative, I would say that we're in the, so we are kind of working to reduce that deficit. Based on some of the changes that we've made over the year, the actual projected deficit for the year has dropped from where kind of we started. I would need to pull up reports just to get you the right number. But it's, it was a significant one that required, work across case, working to manage down case service expenditures and working on some of these complement issues that we're talking about. But I'm not trying to, I'd be happy to follow up. I just want to make sure I've got like the exact right number at this time for you.
Well, Deputy Commissioner, you shared with me it was around $10 million a year, about $20 million total. That was a couple weeks ago. Is that roughly accurate?
Ballpark in terms, but that was at the beginning of the fiscal year, and again, we've worked to manage. We've worked to manage that.
Okay,
down.
you shared that with me a couple weeks ago, but again, I know the governor's budget is trying to come up with about 5 a year for the next 4, so it's about $20 million. Representative Johnson.
When exactly did you know that deficit was reaching that level?
So that was
Deputy Rowe?
Mr. Chair, Representative. Again, that was towards the end of towards the end of 24 into early 25 as we reforecast it. Once we, again, had better financial projections as well as had a better sense of what the national landscape was looking like.
So final question, then I got to move over to Kozlowski.
Okay.
Representative Johnson.
So I have two, follow-up. I know in September of 2024, you saw things going in the wrong direction because you decided that you needed to do. So you must have thought it was a big enough deficit at that time to start making significant changes. But my last question is, what is the policy with DEED? Because we have a lot of very, very expensive program coming up. What is the policy of DEED of what deficit amount do you think is big enough that you throw up a red flag that you say, we got to get down there and let them know about it right away?
Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Representative, I don't think that there's a policy per se. I think the department works to try to manage within its budgets as much as possible. And and I guess you could say that, the request in the governor's supplemental is a recognition that, to preserve these services and to preserve, the maximum access to these services that we can, that we need to have the conversation that we're having here today. So I don't know if there's a formal policy. I suppose it would rather depend on the size of the program, since that would kind of determine the scope of the variance that you'd be talking about.
Representative Kozlowski.
Thank you, Chair Baker, and to our testifier here who's been walking us through this. I've been sitting here and listening to the conversation and just trying to stew on a few different pieces. And I think there's sort of the looking back and looking forward. And, I've heard of what's changed in the last 30 to 60 days because the way that I think about it from December to now, December is after November. In a lot of uncertainty, and I think like the conversation does fit squarely in here around the federal government and the chaos that's been happening. I have concerns there, but I actually want to go back to kind of the heart of, our funding, our kids and our families and our adults and people with disabilities don't come in pieces, but our funding do. And in this case, you walked us through kind of how we got here of the funding has remained flat while the need has increased, and that we've been able to serve more folks than ever, especially out of the pandemic, that applications are up, that increased service delivery costs. Staff, I'm reading that they haven't got a COLA, complex needs with case management, case services. To me, what I'm hearing is that we can sit here and have an argument and point fingers, though I think there are certainly fingers to be pointed and points to be made. But can you just square it for the points that you were talking through and the complex needs, the staffing challenges, and paint us that picture? Like, can you just re-clarify why are those factors so important in the position that we're in, and why it's so alarming, and the bells have been alarmed that the funding fallout with the Department of Education, and I also think about the Bureau of Indian Affairs has been cut. This plays squarely into these federal fundings and the clawback of our Native students, our Native learners, so many of my community members, Black, Brown, and Indigenous students, adults needing these services, that in every direction it's being clawed back. And so can you just paint us that picture again and bring it back home to why these services and complex needs are growing, and why that is alarming to then be in the funding picture that we're in.
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Kozlowski. I think maybe to kind of maybe talk about just about what this means, right? Again, I think many of the members around the table have kind of talked about the value of these services and what they mean for folks. In terms of access to employment, access to stable employment, access to competitive integrated employment allows people a chance at independent living. It allows people to it allows them to have independence, and it allows them to have access to a better quality of life. And I think that particularly as we see kind of greater complexity in our world, right? As we have seen kind of greater demands placed upon parts of the social safety net, as we've seen kind of increased demands for disability services. And I think there's also been a recognition that more people have elements of disability in their lives than we previously knew in this country. I think there was a time in our country's history when voc rehab was, you had an accident at the sawmill, and that's still very much part of it. But the majority of our clients now are folks who suffer from mental illness, who have kind of cognitive challenges, and the mission, and I think what our voc rehab team does so well, and our network of providers do so well, is help see the individual, because there is no one size fits all for disability, and try to help each person achieve the best for themselves and their lives. So that's again, that's why we take this so seriously. I think that's why you see the governor's recommendation in the revised budget. And I think maybe just one final thought. It's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of social support here, and I think in this particular budget moment, we need to be very thoughtful and careful about how we're proceeding. So thank you for the.
Thank you. And again, I want to move on to the next bill, if I could, too, just to wrap it up. Did you have a follow-up, Representative Kozlowski? I want to be respectful of the time for the next hearing.
Thank you, Chair, and to our testifier. No, I think it's really important. I appreciate that, bringing it back home to what we're doing here. And I think in terms of looking ahead, and what is so alarming and scary in going forward is that with the federal government, and that is a reality, I feel like we are being like racially gaslit in these conversations here, in saying that that's not a reality, when we have a federal government that has moved enforcement, has changed the duties, it's unclear guidance, and we should all be having these conversations and also raising the flags that how will our states not struggle without federal assistance, oversight, and enforcement. And so I just think it's very important, and I appreciate that we are running out of time, and so I'll end there. But I just want to make sure that we do have that on the table here.
And again, finally, members, again, I wanted to bring up, I'm going to have my committee administrator send out the report for everybody to look at on the individual placement support report. The reason I want to share this with you is as we come into our budget discussions here in the next couple of weeks, I want you to see on the, I don't know, there's a page here that's about where are these services offered in our communities. Find your community and do me a favor, do yourself a service to those community members. Ask them, what is this program like here? Follow a person kind of to this business, goes to this place and works at TJ Maxx, or they work at whatever. I'm just asking members to pay attention to this because this is important. Again, the governor is asking for a 60% reduction in this program. I want you to hear what the mental health providers are saying, how valuable this is. And I'm hoping that we can find ways of fixing that huge reduction that the governor is suggesting that we do. My last question for the Deputy Commissioner, the Wage Enhancement Fund. I know that came up this morning with one of my providers. It's not really related to this, but it sounds like there's going to be this extra surplus of money in a wage replacement fund. And if you can't answer it, because and I totally understand, but apparently $4.7 million is going to be kind of like refunded or given to a lot of providers in this space of VRS services. It's in the space of this. Again, it's maybe not particular. So maybe my question later on, we can take this offline, is if you are not able to use that money for these kind of programs, are you statutorily not able to do certain things? I'd like to know that because sometimes they get these windfall checks back that they're not expecting. And yet when we're cutting really valuable programs and we've got excess over here, I want to know how can you sort of help balance out that? And again, that's an important issue that I want to come up with at some point. Any final comments, and we'll let you go.
Just to that last comment, I would love to follow up with you offline on that, Mr. Chair. And no, I just wanted to offer my appreciation for the discussion today and for the interest in members.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner. Deputy Commissioner, thank you so much for your time today. All right, members, we're back on to our House bills. If Representative Hicks could come forward with her bill. House File 2838 is being, there she is, okay. Is going to be held over for possible confusion. I'll say that the chair, sorry? Consideration. Did I? Oh, hey, I'm a day older this year, so just give me a break, okay? That's true, okay. Anyway, sorry about that. The chair will move House File 2838 for consideration for a later bill. Representative Hicks, welcome to the committee, and please proceed. And again, just a reminder to all testifiers, we're at about a 2-minute limit or so to everybody's thoughts. So Representative Hicks, to your bill.
Thank you so much, Chair and Committee. So the presentation that happened right before is a really good primer for my bill because my bill is an attempt to plug the hole. I want to be really clear. I listened to the conversations that the committee was having, and I'm just going to reset us back to the people that receive services for just a minute. People with disabilities in this state and in this country are constantly being the last individuals thought of. Frankly, their lives are dependent on the decisions that are made in this building and in buildings like it across the country and in Washington, D.C. They do not remain on the planet without the systems and the services necessary to keep them here. VRS is one of those services that helps them find and obtain meaningful and competitive employment. People with disabilities are an untapped and underutilized resource for our communities, for our employers, and frankly, for our communities as a whole. When people with disabilities are able to obtain integrated, competitive wage jobs that allow them to work off of Social Security, we all save money. It's a good thing. Voc Rehab is a good thing. It is a proactive service that benefits people with disabilities and our communities. And the vocational rehabilitation counselors that do that work are an integral part of our state. They're an integral part of our state workforce. And frankly, they're saving us money every day. They do everything from help people identify what they might be good at to identify what accommodations and assistive technology they might need to do those jobs. Just yesterday, I wrote a letter of recommendation for a young woman that I helped get connected to vocational rehabilitation after I helped her win a Social Security case when she was 18, 19. She is now a social worker and applying for her big girl job. And she is going to do amazing. And And I was sharing with her Representative Davids this morning, because he's aware, he knows the family, how excited I was to send her that letter of recommendation. None of that would have been possible without Voc Rehab. And the cuts that are coming to Voc Rehab are going to hurt people with disabilities, full stop. It's going to hurt them, it's going to hurt our employers, and it's going to hurt our communities. So today, I am asking you to lay over this bill and find whatever money you possibly can in your budget to plug the hole that, again, is going to affect people with disabilities, because every time there's a hole, because every time there's a cut, because every time there's an issue, it's always my community that ends up on the chopping block. And I'm going to spend this entire session in every committee across this Capitol asking for money to plug the holes that support people with disabilities. It's the only reason I ran for office, and I don't plan to stop anytime soon. Would like my testifiers to talk to you about the work they do and why it's so valuable.
Thank you, Representative Hicks. We've got 3 testifiers on the list here. Ms. Schultz, if you would introduce yourself. Is it, oh, Zoom, that would be on Zoom, thank you. Ms. Schultz, if you could, again, we're going to keep to about a 2-minute discussion. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you. Co-Chair Baker and committee members. For the record, my name is Renata Schultz, and I have worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor for 18 years in the North Minneapolis team at DVRS. I am testifying in my capacity as a member of the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, MAPE, which is a union of over 18,500 state workers all across Minnesota's agencies, boards, and commissions. My caseload consists of adults who either have a physical and/or mental disability. I would like to share information with you about the Ticket to Work, which is part of the DEED Voc Rehab Services program. Ticket to Work supports individuals receiving Social Security disability benefits in obtaining and maintaining employment, so they are no longer needing to rely on those federal benefits. While participating in the Ticket program, beneficiaries can get the help they need to safely explore their work options without immediately losing their benefits, so they can find that job that is right for them. Beneficiaries can also use a combination of work incentives to maximize their income while they begin to earn enough to support themselves. From 2021 to 2023, the state of Minnesota earned $61 million from the federal government due to the savings created by individuals getting off Social Security benefits. During the pandemic, Voc Rehab Services helped 9,492 Minnesotans with a disability to get back to work. In federal fiscal year 2023, VRS helped employ 1,898 Minnesotans. They averaged $16.37 an hour and worked approximately 23.2 hours a week. The total wages of those individuals in Minnesota came to $37.5 million in 2023. The work that we do is important and vital to Minnesotans with disabilities and the state economy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schultz, for your testimony today. Next, I have Chandra Peterson. We have it on Zoom, but actually we have a bonus because you're here in person.
Is
that right? Good. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and continue.
Wonderful. Co-Chair Baker and committee members, for the record, my name is Chandra Peterson, and I am a career counselor with VRS. Next month will mark 14 years as a state employee. I have a very unique position. I am fluent in American Sign Language and serve individuals who are deaf across all of southern Minnesota. Today I am testifying in my capacity as a member of MAPE. First, I want to thank Representative Hicks for introducing this bill. As you are all aware, VRS is facing a catastrophic budget shortfall. In just 4 days, permanent layoff letters will be sent to impacted staff. They will join the more than 30 people who have already taken early retirement, voluntary layoff, had their positions eliminated, or been let go because they just haven't passed their probation period yet. People are losing their jobs through no fault of their own. In the October 2024 all-staff meeting, where staff first learned of our budget concerns, this question was raised. How and why did leadership allow our budget and spending to get this out of control? The response, and I quote, "We are not overspent. What is happening is we are forecasting out 1 year and seeing where we'll be if we don't make changes. We've never been in a better position financially." Even now, we are told that we are not in a budget deficit, nor were budget mistakes made. During our recent staff meeting, there was another question. The question went unanswered, but it provides important context in our current budget situation. It was no surprise that hiring additional staff when we had the money would have long-term impacts on our budget. It was also no surprise that there would not be increased funding at the state or federal level because we have experienced flat funding for years. Why was a plan not put in place to level off our staffing and spending over the last 2 years to ensure that we would not reach this point? We aren't in a budget deficit yet, but we will be if we don't lay off and reduce services.
That's okay.
It was said in a prior meeting that leadership wasn't looking closely at the budget because they didn't have to. But it seems like they really should have been looking a little closer. So where does the responsibility lie for our current budget situation? And if it wasn't a budget mistake, how did we get here? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony today, Ms. Peterson, and thank you for joining us in person. Next up is Sheena Lewison. Jewison, thank you. Welcome to the committee. Introduce yourself and please proceed.
Co-Chair Baker and committee members, for the record, my name is Sheena Jewison, she, her, hers pronouns, and I also work as a rehab counselor for VRS, and I am also testifying in my capacity as a MAPE member. I have had the privilege to serve as a counselor for about the last 6 years. I have had a mixed caseload of adults, students, and IPS, as well as taking on most recently an all-student caseload. So thank you, Representative Hicks, for introducing this. As you have heard from my colleagues, the work that we do is incredibly important to Minnesota's economic growth and sustainability. For the past 10 years, I have dedicated myself to supporting people with disabilities in achieving their full employment potential, a mission that is both rewarding and meaningful. However, due to the uncertainty surrounding the state budget for VRS, I had made the difficult decision to leave my position for another state employment job at the Minnesota Sex Offender Program. This decision is heartbreaking. Deed VRS invested in my master's education to become a rehab counselor. The impact of my departure extends far beyond my career. Approximately 70 youth with disabilities I'm currently working with are being left without a dedicated counselor. With existing caseloads already at capacity, it is unrealistic to expect remaining staff to absorb these cases without significant consequences like decreased quality of services and delayed responsiveness. This situation underscores the growing crisis. Without adequate and sustainable funding, we risk further destabilizing the system that is vital to the success of individuals with disabilities and the overall workforce of Minnesota. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Jewison, and thanks for staying with the state with other positions at this point. I know this has got to be a hard transition, but thank you for testifying and the good work you're doing with students, so thank you for that. I don't have any other testifiers on the list. Are there other members of the public that would like to testify in favor or opposition to the bill? Seeing none, I'll take it to member questions. Any questions? Sure. Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I'd spoken about this bill with Representative Hicks right as she was introducing it. We just want to thank her for her work and leadership in this area and just for being such a champion for these issues and to all the testifiers. This is clearly a really important program that's doing a lot of good, and we want to make sure to support it. So thank you to all of you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Mecklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We all see these services in all of our districts, and they are very, very important. But to the Ms. Jewison, you stated that you were working with adults, students, and IPS?
Rep. Mecklin, is that for Ms. Jewison? Okay, Ms. Jewison.
Yeah. Yes, I had 2 different caseloads throughout my time at VRS.
Representative Mecklin.
I worked in the private sector as a employment specialist, specifically for IPS, that we contract with.
Representative Mecklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this wasn't all at the same time? I mean, like, one day you're doing one, the next day you're doing the other, it was?
Oh, yes,
Ms.
correct.
Jewison?
I have had, it was chunks of time.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Mecklin.
So when if one day you're working on the VRS side and the next day you're working on the IPS side, were you paid from two different funding streams?
Ms. Jewison?
No,
Okay,
Representative Mecklen?
thank you.
wasn't at the same time. That's what I mean, like, so from 2016 to 2018, I provided the service IPS, the job placement portion, and working directly with the people with disabilities. Then from 2018 to 2022, I worked with mixed caseload, and then the remaining time till current with just students.
Representative Mecklen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. So a general question is from both of you too, that there's something changed. Is there a general consensus amongst all of you you workers as to where this all started, what's really behind all this?
To either of the testifiers, Ms.
I would say
Jewison?
right now, what we have been saying to our clients and referral sources is that COVID created a bit of a overflow of money that allowed us to spend on clients and staffing. It was like rollover money, and so now that that is gone, we have to kind of revert to what services looked like before COVID.
Representative Hicks, want to comment?
I would just like to say that vocational rehab has always had a situation where we are opening and closing categories. And if you're not familiar with vocational rehab, categories are basically the severity of your disability. And so opening and closing of categories is, in my opinion, one of the most frustrating things as a community member and a person who supports people with disabilities. And the reason that that's so frustrating is because the determination about what category you're in determines whether or not you get help to get a job. And people with disabilities are the most unemployed and underemployed population in this country. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I don't know if anyone has anyone in this room that they love that has autism, but specifically autism, people with autism are employed at 40 to 60% less than people without autism. And we are talking about people with autism across the spectrum, everything from folks with real high severe needs to folks who have very minimal support needs, right? And so when we close categories, what we're doing is those folks that have less support needs, we're saying, well, you go ahead and figure out how to get a job. When we know very well that the data says that without intensive supports and guidance on how to do so, they won't. So what happens is they then apply for Social Security. They are then utilizing our social safety nets and not getting a job. It makes no logical sense to take our resources away from the thing that gets people with disabilities a job. And what is being proposed in the VRS cuts are category closes in addition to the laying off of staff. And when staff have caseloads, how big's your caseload right now?
Ms. Peterson?
My caseload is currently, I think, like 55, but with my unique caseload, I have a slightly lower caseload. That is due to the fact that I am working with a unique population, and working with the deaf population takes much more time than working with the general population. We have much more limited resources. But in general, I would say that the average counselor's caseload is around 70 up to 100. We have one counselor on our team who has topped 100, 109.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap this up because we've got to move on to the next bill. So Representative Hicks, could you give us a very quick closing up of your bill so we can move on to the next bill?
When people with disabilities do not find and maintain integrated competitive employment in the state of Minnesota, it costs us money. We should spend the money to save that money.
And with that, the chair will move, will hold House File 2838 for further consideration. Thank you very much for your testimony today, folks.
Thank you.
And our final bill up today is House File 1538. Representative Mueller will head to the table. And again, we've got a number of testifiers. I want to remind everybody we've got 2 minutes apiece. We want to make sure we have to be out of here by 10 o'clock this morning, folks. So Representative Mueller, welcome to the testifying table. The chair will say that Representative Mueller is bringing forward House File 1538 for further consideration. Representative Mueller, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. I know it's been kind of a long day, and so I will try to do this as judiciously as possible. I had things that I was going to say, but we have little time. So 1538 DE3, that's the bill that you should have in front of you.
And to your amendment, maybe we should deal with that first to get the bill.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. Can we please adopt D?
We sure can. So in front of members is the DE3 as an author's amendment. Any comments or questions on the DE to get this shape to the author? Seeing none, all those in favor of supporting the DE3 signify by saying aye. Any opposed? There we go. As amended, your bill is now in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will definitely be excited to talk about DE3. This is, teacher apprenticeship is something that I have been working and considering since the moment I've been elected. We do not simply have enough people in our pipeline to look at education, and we are needing to have many people from many different backgrounds join our schools, and it is simply untenable for several of our people who are already in schools as paras or subs for them to go back through a traditional pathway. Almost 45 states have something similar to an apprenticeship program at this time. And so I'm looking at some of the, when we think about some of the other things that we offer for educators, grow your own programs, some other grants, teacher apprenticeship is very different. It is not just grow your own. It is a very specific apprenticeship that has to follow specific guidelines. And so many of you know how apprenticeships work in other trades. Education is a little unique because of the fact that they have to follow other licensure areas. We'll go, this bill would create a JATC where we capture the money from that the governor has set aside to be able to create an apprenticeship program. The money would go to a service co-op that then would be able to set up the JATC, which has equal members of employer, employee, including, which is our union. And so with that, I know that we're really short on time. There's a lot that could be said about this, and I know we have a lot of testifiers. I would ask that my testifiers kind of triage here.
Yep, and if I could have
very quickly.
Kate Snyder come to the table to be first up, and then on deck is via Zoom, Kelly Oborn, and then Gina Boots will be on third up. So if Gina and Kate could come to the table, again, 2 minutes, we've got to move it along pretty quickly. So welcome to the table, Ms. Snyder, welcome to the committee, and please proceed for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. My name is Caitlin Snyder. I'm with Education Minnesota. We represent 84,000 educators across the state, approximately 600 in each House district. That includes teachers, education support professionals, and other people that would be affected by this apprenticeship. When I signed up to testify, I thought I would be here today in support of the bill that Representative Mueller had in front of you, because she had a fairly novel idea, in my opinion, about having this be a competitive grant for everyone who is able to make a statewide JATC. This would make Education Minnesota in the model that we are presenting and that was discussed yesterday in House File 2441 at the table, and there sort of be a proof is in the pudding element. Unfortunately, today, the amendment instead says that one cooperative will be able to perform this work across the state. My apologies for members who have not served on education. This is going to get a little technical. A cooperative is a regional approach to different special needs, particularly severe special education needs. It is a regional approach. It is not a statewide approach. In comparison, Education Minnesota has 551 local contracts. We are representing every traditional school district, our co-ops, our intermediates, our charters, and our non-public schools. As you know, the JATC has to be 50-50 between employees and employers. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision about who will be the fiscal host. Today and every day, I stand with workers, and there are a number of reasons why I want to talk that through. In my hometown of Roseau, Minnesota, the last contract for our education support professionals, so our food workers, our bus drivers, they gained a 10% pay increase, up to $13 an hour. So do you think that somebody who's making $13 an hour and through this apprenticeship has the ability to double their income, will they feel like they can push back against their employer when it comes to decisions about the teacher apprenticeship? What if there are questions about the difference between the collective bargaining agreements between our education support professionals and our teachers? Or questions about the differences in the contracts between Edina and Intermediate 287? The staff attorneys at Education Minnesota are experts at interpreting and enforcing our collective bargaining agreements, and I would trust them with my life.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. That was 2 minutes. I need to move on. My apologies. Ms. Oborn, if you would be ready, are you online? And then we've got Gina Boots up next.
Thank you, Chair Baker, Representative Mueller, and committee members. My name is Dr. Kelly Crick-Oborn, and I co-lead the development of the University of St. Thomas's undergraduate registered apprenticeship program for teaching in partnership with my colleague, Dr. Susie K. Beck. I'm here to support teacher apprenticeships in our state and provide context of other teacher apprenticeships in development in Minnesota. University of St. Thomas has the longest running teacher residency program in Minnesota, established through strong and sustained collaborative partnerships, 10 years with St. Paul Public Schools, 9 years with Minneapolis Public Schools, and 4 years in partnership with a consortium of 15 Minnesota charter schools. With our district partner residencies, we have prepared a total of 406 highly qualified Minnesota teachers. As leaders in partnership pathways, we're well positioned to innovate in the registered apprenticeship space, and we're fortunate enough to be among a handful of Minnesota educator prep programs that were awarded a Minnesota MDE apprenticeship planning grant last June. For the past 10 months in partnership with St. Paul Public Schools and St. Paul Federation of Educators, we have been building an undergraduate registered apprenticeship program for teaching. The development of our pathway has greatly benefited from consulting provided by Gina Boots of Brightworks, who you will hear from shortly, and we're deeply appreciative of the open communication and collaboration with Mankato State and iTrack leaders, who have graciously invited us to learn from their process and their experience. The Department of Labor and Industry has been incredibly supportive. St. Thomas's AA to BS teacher apprenticeship program will fill a critical gap, removing barriers and increasing access for working adults who are aspiring educators, specifically special educators, to pursue their undergrad degree and their teaching license. To date, 95 dedicated St. Paul Public School staff members, most of whom are paraprofessionals working full-time with students with disabilities, have expressed interest in this pathway. For our longstanding partner, St. Paul Public Schools, it's not financially tenable to maintain a robust graduate program while simultaneously launching a pilot of undergrad. Today, I'm asking you to support funding and statewide coordination for equitable distribution of funds in support of registered apprenticeships for teaching without reducing ongoing support for existing teacher residency programs, including those in charter schools.
Thank you, Ms. Oborn, very much. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Boots, if you could start, and then Aaron Larson is on deck. Ms. Boots.
Thank you, co-chairs and representatives, for allowing me to speak today. For the record, my name is Gina Boots. I am the Teacher and Apprenticeship Liaison at Brightworks Educational Cooperative, a multi-employer sponsor for teacher apprenticeship. I was previously a Director of Special Education at Intermediate 288 as part of the team that built the first teacher apprenticeship program that Superintendent Bowe is here to speak about. And I have since shifted into the sponsorship position charged with implementing and oversight of the program. As this committee knows, apprenticeship is new to teaching in the public sector, but it is not new to the state of Minnesota. I have spent countless hours learning from other states and other industries on how to build a sustainable system for teacher apprenticeship. Taking what we've learned over the past 2+ years, I have also collaborated with many districts that to develop their apprenticeship programs, and many of whom are here today to testify and included in the handout I provided. By fall, Brightworks programs will consist of 3 university partners, multiple school districts across the state from both rural and metro, 6 licensure areas, and an estimated 85 apprentices with more in development. Brightworks has received a grant to build out our pre-apprenticeship program to increase access to candidates needing the 60 credits required to access the apprenticeship program. We're collaborating with DLI in a webinar with the local workforce boards, and we have multiple meetings with University of North Dakota and U of M about starting low incidence licensure areas, which are some of the hardest positions to fill in our state. In January, we launched our Joint Apprenticeship Training Committee with guidance from DLI that's made up of both metro and rural representation and 50% local unions and 50% management. That JAT structure brings sustainability for fidelity of programming and funding. I will cut my remarks now and thank Mueller and all representatives for this bill.
Thank you so much, Ms. Booth, for your testimony today. Ms. Larson, and then on deck is Sarah Paul.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding House File 1538. My name is Erin Larson, and I'm the Director of Apprenticeship at the Department of Labor and Industry. First, I want to thank Representative Mueller for meeting with the Commissioner and I earlier this month. We appreciate that we share the goal of creating additional pathways into teaching and agree that registered apprenticeships for teachers are a successful model to bring more highly skilled individuals into the profession. As you heard yesterday in this committee, DLI has its own statewide teacher registered apprenticeship proposal that is part of Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan's 2025 budget, and DLI will continue to support the teacher registered apprenticeship language in House File 2441, which directs funding to a labor organization representing educators to establish a joint apprenticeship training committee. An overwhelming majority of school districts that will participate in registered apprenticeship in the coming year will involve a unionized workforce. Education Minnesota's relationship with more than 477 local union affiliates in the state makes them uniquely suited to lead efforts in developing a statewide joint apprenticeship training committee. Returning to today's bill, because DLI is responsible for regulating registered apprenticeship programs in Minnesota and ensuring compliance with state laws and federal regulations, we would like to highlight that much of what is proposed as program requirements in House File 1538, lines 1.9 through 2.10, is already provided for in apprenticeship law, Minnesota Statutes Chapter 178, and specifically the requirements outlined in 1.19 through 1.22 are partially at odds with existing statute. Instead, we'd recommend streamlining the bill to indicate grant funds could be used to establish a program in accordance with Chapter 178. We also recommend the inclusion of other eligible uses of grant funds for participating school districts, and this would simplify the process for those participating. We provided these recommendations to Representative Mueller as part of our technical assistance, and we look forward to continued conversations with her on House File 1538.
Thank you very much, Ms. Larson. Appreciate your time on that. Sarah Paul, and then next on deck is Terry Priesler. So, Ms. Paul, go ahead. Welcome.
Right. Thank you, Chair Baker, members of the committee, and thank you, Representative Mueller, for championing this important transformation that's happening right now to address the teacher workforce shortage. I'm going to stick to some numbers because I feel like 2 minutes is a brief amount of time. I do have a letter here from 13 districts from across greater Minnesota that I'm speaking in my voice today for, as well as my summary of the talking points that I was planning to share so that you can see those. First of all, I represent the sponsor right now that's approved. North Branch is an approved sponsor of registered teacher apprenticeships. There's 3 currently approved sponsors. We built on the momentum of 100% of our apprentices being on track to graduate with their teacher licensure in June of 2026 and expanded to work with 13 districts and growing across the state to address critical licensure area needs. We are grounded in some of the significant needs of licensure that is not the same in every single district. And so we're very fortunate that we've gotten support from the Department of Labor and Industry. Leslie Philman is in the audience. She's an amazing support person that has helped us form our JATC, the Forward Together JATC. It's an important governance structure, and in my notes I've laid out how that governance structure allows for the local voice of our employed teachers and the local voice of our administrators and our paraprofessionals to come together and create that governance structure that then allows those local agreements to make sure that we're honoring local context. So we're very, very excited, very appreciative to be part of this work and this transformation that's happening. And again, I'll share those documents with you. Thank you, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Ms. Paul, very much for your testimony. Next up is Priesler, and then also Ms. Franke, if you could come forward, and we've got one after that. So go ahead. Please proceed.
Thank you, Co-Chair Baker. My name is Dr. Terry Priesler. I am the Acting Director for the Center for Educator Partnerships and Student Support at Minnesota State Mankato and College of Ed. My 39 years in education have spanned across K-12 as a teacher, principal, school, superintendent, and now in the College of Education. You have heard a lot about the high needs for special education teachers, so I will cut all of that part, no question about it. In particular, in areas such as ASD, EBD, dual license undergrad, we are the first teacher prep program in the state of Minnesota who was able to develop in partnership with school districts at a local level to develop this dual licensure program to meet the needs of students. We would like to continue on in that local partnerships. Some key points, as you heard. Apprenticeship is different than our traditional online. I mean, you would think traditional is in person at a campus, and online now it's become traditional. Apprenticeship is different in that it is within this workday, it is surround supports for the apprentice, who is the paraprofessional, and has their local labor unions and leadership, and within that school district. And so being able to develop a program that is different, is nimble, is responsive, and meets the needs of apprentice, school district, and local communities is imperative.
Ms. Priest, I do really got to wrap it up because we're running out of time.
All right. I just thank you for the chance to speak and the importance of the local governance structures and local control.
Thank you so
very
much. And Ms. Frankie, sorry, we're going to cut you down about 1 minute because we have one more after this. Ms. Bowes, if you could come forward, and then we're going to have almost no questions from members because we're going to have to follow up. It is being laid over. So, Ms. Frankie, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Baker, Chair Pinto, and Representative Mueller. Thank you for letting me present on behalf of House File 1538. I am Danae Franke. I'm coming from the University of Minnesota. I'm representing a teacher apprenticeship model that hopes to launch in the fall. We represent 4 of our campuses: Morris, Duluth, Crookston, and the Twin Cities campus. We're working with several districts from urban to rural communities, and the teacher apprenticeship model is something that can transform the teacher shortage in special education across the state of Minnesota. Frankly, the smaller districts that I'm working with up north are desperate to have teachers ready to go and be fully licensed as Tier 3 teachers.
Thank you.
Happy to answer questions later. I know we're short on time. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate helping us out here. And then Ms. Bowes, if you could just take a minute. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairs Baker and Pinto and members of the committee. My name is Valerie Bowe. I'm the superintendent of Northeast Metro 916. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the Intermediate Teacher Apprenticeship Program. Last fall, the intermediate school districts, in partnership with Brightworks, Mankato State University, DLI, and our local teacher unions, launched Minnesota's first registered teacher apprenticeship program. Initial funds to start our teacher apprenticeship program were provided through the education budget bill last session. In our apprenticeship program, a cohort of 21 paraprofessionals engaged in a 2-year program of job-embedded learning with experienced Tier 4 teachers and related technical instruction with Mankato State University faculty to meet the requirements for both a bachelor's degree and dual licensure in emotional behavior disorders and autism spectrum disorders. This is a required specialized license and is unique to our special education Setting 4 programs. Each apprentice committed to a 2-year program that includes 8-hour workdays following a teacher calendar and 2 summers of extended school year programming. The rigorous 2-year program meets the state's licensure standards while also transforming the traditional way we do student teaching through job-embedded projects. And finally, we have made a commitment to the apprenticeship model and believe it is a proven method to increase the teacher pipeline that will lead to teacher retention by building highly qualified, prepared teachers. We support replicating this model statewide, but also want the committee to be aware that we have a bill in the Education Finance Committee requesting funds to continue our program.
Thank you, Ms. Bowes. Thank you very much. Again, I need to wrap this up. In fact, I'm going to just take away the closing comment. I'm going to take that way. This bill will be held over. Members, again, the chair moves House File 1538 for further consideration. Members, again, I apologize. We've got to end this now. Just quickly, we'll talk about more of the next week's schedule, but Chair Pinto and I have a chance to kind of visit about that later on. So, members, with that, it's a full agenda. My apologies to the next committee. We are adjourned.